Hey guys, I'm super excited for our science experiment today. We are going to get worms to come up out of the ground so we can see them using our own worm water that we're going to make together. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I've got here, and that way you guys can go ahead and get started gathering materials, make a list of what you need, and that way if you want to do this at home, you can. So to start, if you want to see what the directions are in the lesson plan, it's on day 2. It's the social emotional activity, and everything is right there. Okay, now I gathered some things, and one of those things is a fork so I can mix my worm water, a notebook, some mustard, a little bowl to put worms in, some water, and a shovel. Now, not all of these things are going to be in the lesson plan, but I've already tried this once and I figured out that there are some things that work better than others. Now, you're going to want to go outside and look around. What I had to do to find a good place, you're looking for moist, cool soil because that's a good home for worms. What I had to do was find this flower pot, which was right here, and when I moved it, I found all this soft soil underneath, and we already have a worm right here. Now, when we find our worms, we're going to want a good, safe place to put them. So I'm going to go ahead and get some dirt out of this soil, or out of this flower pot. We're going to put it in here, nice and cool. I'll put a little tiny bit of clean water in there. And that way they have a cool, muddy place where they can be safe. Okay, I'll add a little bit more in there and make that kind of soft and moist, and worms really like that. So we're gonna go ahead and get this guy right here. Now you want to be really gentle with them, really gentle. Okay, there he is. He's not moving too much, and that's okay. We'll put him in here where he'll be safe, cover him up with a little dirt. If worms are out in the sun too long, they tend to dry out, so we don't want that to happen. We'll give him a nice, cool, safe place where he can relax until we can put him back in his home. Now, to kind of get this spot ready for our worm water, I'm going to take the shovel and I'm going to clear away the wood chips and the sticks and all that stuff. Just clear that out of the way. You can dig a little bit if you want to, just a little bit. This is a great spot to do our worm water experiment. And just dig up a little bit. Okay, I feel like that looks pretty good. You're gonna find some other bugs too, and you just want to be careful not to hurt them. You know, this is their home and we're coming in here to see them and observe them, but we don't want to cause any trouble, okay? All right, let's get to mixing the worm water. There are exact measurements in your lesson plan. I'm going to kind of eyeball it, but you kiddos can ask your mom and dad for help. You're going to need the water and some mustard. And just take some mustard. You want about a tablespoon of mustard. You're going to put it in there, and it's not going to mix right away, which is why you're going to need a fork. Go ahead and mix it up like this. Now, can anybody guess why this mustard water might make the worms come out of the ground? Alright, so we just poured our mustard water onto the soil that we had kind of prepared, and this takes time for the worms to come up out of the ground. It takes 5 to 10 minutes usually, so this is a good opportunity to learn a little bit about patience and why it's important to be patient. And while you're thinking about why it's important to be patient, you can watch the soil. And if you see anything moving in the soil, you can use your fingers to see if it's a worm or not. So like I said, this is going to take a while. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera, and I want you guys to think about why it's important to be patient especially because worms move so slowly. And sometimes there are other instances in life when you have to be patient, like when you're waiting in line or waiting for a meal. So while I turn this off and you guys are waiting to see what happens next, you can talk with your moms and dads about why it's important to be patient and what you can do to be patient. Now, also at the beginning of this lesson plan, there is an activity where you can make a patience box, and that's for you to use in times like this when you have to wait for something. Your patience box can help you do that calmly. So we'll take one more look at the soil, then we'll turn off the camera, and I will check in later to let you know what we find. Guys, I am so excited to show you exactly what we found in the soil after we dumped our worm water on there. So I went ahead and gathered the worms that I found, and I put them in our little paper bowl like we had outside, and I brought them in here so that I could show you some of the worms. All right, so here we go. So I have a little spoon because I don't really love touching mud, but if you don't mind it, you can use your fingers. But here we've got this guy. That's the first worm we had. And remember how still he was when we picked him up? Well, now he's wiggling around, exploring his dirt. See those lines in his body? That's blood. They have veins. Here's a really little guy. Worms can come in all shapes and sizes. There are big worms, little worms, fat worms, skinny worms, all different kinds of worms. It's pretty cool to watch him wiggle around. And then we have this guy coming out of the top. And then over here even, we can see the soil move a little bit, and here's one coming out down here. That might be the same worm. Now there are even more worms in here, so let me see if I can break apart the soil a little bit and soften it up and see if we can find any more. Remember, we don't want to hurt the worms. Playing with the soil like this is not going to hurt them, but we do want to be able to see them and learn about them. So there's that guy right there, still wiggling around. Okay, let's see if I can find him now. See that little guy right there? He's so small. Look how small he is compared to my finger. Look how big this one is compared to my finger. He's not very big either. So a lot of people use worms for different things. People might use them for fishing, or if they have a pet that eats worms. Some people like to put worms in their garden so that their garden is healthy. All that. Look how awesome, you guys. All right, it looks like we have quite a few healthy worms. Now, normally I would put these worms back in their home where they belong, but we do have an activity coming up this week where we're going to make a worm jar. So I'm going to go ahead and keep these worms safe in a container with their cool, soft, wet dirt, and in a container that they can breathe in. You can't put a lid on the container, else they won't be able to breathe. But that way we'll be able to use them for our worm jar. So a couple more things before I end this video. I may have mentioned earlier, but worms are annelids, which means they have segmented bodies. And some of them you can see the segments on, like this guy right here. Worms are pretty neat because if you happen to be digging and you rip one in half on accident, you shouldn't do it on purpose, but if it happens on accident, it's really no big deal that it will just turn into 2 worms instead of 1. Isn't that crazy? Worms can heal really, really, really fast. Worms like to eat, food like dead leaves, dead animals. They love dirt, and they're really good for the dirt. Worms in your garden are really good. They don't like the light. They're very light sensitive. They really like being in the dark. Worms are nocturnal, which means they're most active at night. So, all right. I'm glad I got to show you the worms that we found, and I'm really excited to make our worm jar with them. So I will be filming another video about that you guys can watch later this week. Hey guys, it's Miss Ryan. First, I just wanted to thank you for watching our video, and I also have some follow-up questions for you so that you can think about the experiment we did today and hopefully learn from it even better. So my first question is, you saw worms. Were you able to count how many worms you saw? And did you see how the worms were moving? Do you think you guys could move like a worm? You'd have to wiggle a lot. I also want to ask you, do you know where the worms might be going if they're burrowing through the ground? And do you know where they came from? Why do you think the mixture made them appear, the mustard mixture? Now, I will give you a hint about the last one. Worms have very sensitive skin, and mustard mixed with water like that causes a little bit of an irritant. So when we pour it over the soil, the worms feel that and they don't really like it, so they want to get away from it. And that's why they all crawl to the surface. And then we can pick them up and wash them off and put them in some safe dirt where there's no mustard. All right, thanks again for watching, and think about those questions. Maybe write your answers down, especially if you have a science journal. You guys were great scientists today, and this is something that you can do at home with your moms and dads. I'll see you guys soon.